Hey everyone, and welcome back to a very long overdue video. About a month ago, I made part 1 of my K-pop Nugudom Iceberg, and today I'm here to share part 2. If you're kind of confused as to what the quote-unquote Nugudom Iceberg is, I really recommend that you check out my part 1, but if you don't feel like doing so, I'll just give you the brief explanation that the Nugudom Iceberg refers to the different tiers of underrated K-pop groups, and as you get lower down into the iceberg, the groups are more and more unknown and unrecognized. In the last episode, we started with the quote-unquote not Nugu tier, which refers to groups that are basically really well known and very popular, and the very bottom tier that we're going to be covering in this episode is the 2 Nugu even for me tier, which includes groups that even I had to search up, even though I kind of pride myself on knowing a lot of underrated groups. There are 10 tiers in this iceberg, and in part 1 we covered the first 5, so in part 2 we're going to be covering the remaining ones. Those being the making no money tier, which is a lighthearted joke, the people only know one member tier, the known for the wrong reasons tier, the barely holding on tier, and as I said before, the bottom tier is the 2 Nugu even for me tier. In each section of this video, I'm going to be talking about one tier and explaining what it means, as well as giving some details as to why I put each group in the tier that I did. I should mention, since a lot of people did have a lot of opposing arguments with my last video, all of the placements of the groups that I put in this tier are just my opinion, and you can totally disagree, but at the same time, this video is really not a super serious one. It's supposed to be very lighthearted and an easy watch, so let's all try to not take things too seriously. And final disclaimer, if a group isn't here that you think belongs on the Nugudom Iceberg, I only picked like 7, 8, or maybe 9 groups for each tier, and I definitely didn't get like every single K-pop group out there, so if you have other ones that you think belong in a certain tier, then you're definitely free to comment those down below. Sorry that this intro is taking a pretty long time. I'm not trying to keep you here all day, so I guess without further ado, let's get into the 6th tier. So the 6th tier is the making no money tier, and this is for groups that people might have vaguely known at one point. Maybe they had a debut or a comeback that did sort of okay internationally and made people aware of them, but the discerning factor about groups in this tier is that they were never really able to gain a sense of consistency with their releases or stability with their popularity. Most of these groups have had releases that have been sort of their peaks in popularity and were never really able to replicate that success, which ended up making most of these groups either disband or fall into inactivity. And the groups in this tier that we're going to be talking about are Favorite, Nature, Signature, 3YE, Dream Note, One Team, UNB, Unity, and Luminous. And I guess without further ado, let's talk about why each of these groups is in this tier. So first off is Favorite, and Charlie, if you're watching, I am very sorry. Favorite are here because they had one really decently successful release with Loca. At this point in time, it has over 6 million streams on Spotify, and deservingly so, it's a really good song. But unfortunately, those casual listeners didn't result in any increased album sales, and not many of these people even tuned into their next comeback. Because Favorite came from a very small company, they weren't really able to ever have any proper promotions, and unlike a lot of their earlier releases, their most recent comeback wasn't even able to be posted on the 1TheK YouTube channel. As far as I know, it was literally only posted on the Super Sound Bugs channel, which I don't know if any of you people have ever heard of that. You probably haven't, which I would assume is probably proof that the company didn't have too much money, and unfortunately the group has been mostly inactive since 2020. Next up we have Signature, who went on an 11-month hiatus from releasing music between 2020 and 2021, and because of their presumable lack of budget, their company actually only gave them 2 singles for their first 2 releases, and it was actually only until 8 months after their debut that they were able to have their first B-sides and mini-album. Unfortunately, this strategy didn't really end up working, and although their first batch of albums did sell out, when they did eventually restock, the group still hasn't hit 10k sales for it. At least internationally, their debut with Nunu actually was really well received, but they were never able to top it in terms of how popular their subsequent releases were, and because the group are no longer rookies, they're not fresh in people's minds anymore, and they've kind of faded into the background. Then we have One Team, who a lot of people were actually talking about during their debut. They got a lot of praise for their unique concept compared to other 4th gen boy groups, and their debut song Vibe is actually one of my all-time favorite debuts ever. However, similar to Signature, they were never able to get the same level of hype that their debut did with any of their comebacks. And as someone who's listened to their entire discography, it's only like 12 songs, so I really recommend that you do the same. I would say that this loss in popularity was probably due to their company not really giving them the best songs post their debut. I think besides Make This, all of their comebacks were kind of lackluster in quality and didn't really have that same charm, I guess. After One Team we have Unity and UNB, which were 2 groups that were made off the survival show The Unit, and I think the main reason that they suffered is because they were a survival show group that wasn't an Mnet survival show group, if that makes sense. You know, people love watching survival shows and they always tune into the final group if that group came from the Produce series or the Girls Planet series. But then there are a bunch of other survival show groups that weren't from those series, such as One the Nine, TO1, Tan, the list goes on, that just didn't reach the same level of success at all. Like, if a survival show group isn't from the Produce or Girls Planet series, or isn't hosted by a specific popular company such as JYP with Twice and Stray Kids, YG with Treasure, iKON or Winner, or B-Lift with an hyphen, then these survival show groups rarely ever do well, and UNB and Unity are just prime examples of that. It's pretty sad because the unit actually had a really cool concept as a survival show. A good 99% of the contestants are former idols or singers that wanted a second chance, and I think that's like awesome. But unfortunately, I guess the show just wasn't able to attract enough viewers to where people tuned into the final group, and both of them ended up disbanding after only 2 releases, which is pretty unfortunate. After them, we have Luminous, who debuted in 2021, but they actually were planned to debut in 2019 under a different company, but due to a lot of unknown reasons, their debut was cancelled and they actually moved to a different one. They haven't really gained much of a fan base, and none of their releases have really done outstandingly well, and while they have made a good amount of appearances on different shows, all of their appearances have been very minor, such as when they were in the audience for Queendom 2. Since they come from a pretty small company and there's not too much hype around the group, they haven't had the opportunity to do many large-scale promotions, and have kind of been lost in the sea of other 4th gen boy groups. Following Luminous, we have Dream Note, who were actually recently able to have their most successful comeback yet, with their title track Ghost actually appearing on the Gaon digital download charts, and is their only song to have over 1 million streams on Spotify. They've actually been able to have some okay domestic promotions, being able to sing some television soundtracks, but because they come from a small company, it's unsure whether or not they're going to be able to have another comeback, and whether or not it'll do as well as Ghost is also up in the air because they don't have a very strong fan base. But if and when they do come back, hopefully they aren't as unfortunate as the other groups in this tier and are able to actually improve upon their success. A trend in the downfall of a lot of Nugu 4th gen girl groups is that the pandemic really did affect them in a negative way, and Nature is another example of that. Going semi-viral and having a lot of international success with their comeback girls, after the release of that comeback, things were looking up for Nature and they even got to do a studio choom for promotions. Unfortunately though, due to hard circumstances, they weren't able to have another comeback until January of 2022, and due to a lot of different reasons, Rika Rika wasn't able to keep the momentum that girls gave them. But hopefully soon they'll be able to get back on the right track and gain some more popularity. And finally, we have 3YE, and I think that's how you pronounce it, who are a pretty unique girl group, and the fact that they only have 3 members. And while this does make them stand out, I also think this might be one of the reasons that they aren't as popular as they could be. Typically when someone looks for a new group to stand, they're looking for a group with at least 4 members, and usually upwards of 7. And 3YE just do not fit this criteria. A lot of people know who they are, and a lot of their comebacks have gotten a really high praise from K-pop stans. But I think their lack of members makes people kind of hesitant to look further into the group. Or at least that's how I personally felt about them. But that's no fault of the girls, because they're all definitely very talented. And that actually concludes this tier. We talked about 9 groups in this tier, which has made this section pretty lengthy actually, and hopefully I was able to keep your attention throughout. So without further ado, let's move on to the next tier, which is the people know only one member tier. So as I said previously, this is the people only know one member tier, and I think that is pretty self-explanatory in itself. Throughout K-pop, there have been so many groups where one member outshines all of the rest, such as Miss A or Astro, and while those 2 groups were actually still able to thrive despite the gap in popularity, none of the groups in this tier were able to do the same. Maybe one of the members is super popular on TikTok, but people don't care to check out their group's music, or maybe 1 or 2 of the members have survival show clout, so people only wanted to see them in that survival show group, and their popularity from the survival show didn't transfer over to their previous or future group. So the groups that I chose for this tier are Pink Fantasy, BAE173, Secret Number, Up Attention, Black Swan, Lightsum, and Mirai. And first off, just to get the odd one out of the way, let's talk about Pink Fantasy. So Pink Fantasy is a girl group under My-Doll Entertainment that is most famous for their member Daewon, who always covers their face with a bunny mask. They're classified as a quote-unquote hidden member and only have 1 or 2 parts in all of their songs. And this is no shade directed towards them, but if you ask anybody what they know about Pink Fantasy besides like Jihoon's Carrot, who has a great channel that you should check out, chances are they're either not going to know Pink Fantasy at all, or they're only going to know about the girl in the bunny mask. None of their songs have really ever done that well, and because the members of this group are constantly changing, people really do only know Daewon. And that's about it for Pink Fantasy. So next up we have BAE173, and people actually know 2 members who are both in the produce group X1. Hangil and Dohyun definitely had a lot of popularity coming into BAE173. Pre-debut they had their own subunit called H&D that they released music under, but I think a lot of people just didn't really care to tune into this group when when they actually debuted. Maybe it's the name because BAE173 is a very big mouthful, but out of most, if not all of the ONEUS that I've interacted with in my life, ONEUS are X1 stans by the way, almost none of them care about or follow this group in the slightest. They still talk about Hangul and Dohyun individually, they have like acting gigs every once in a while that people get excited for, but the two of them barely transferred any popularity from X1 to their group after X1 disbanded. And since they have pretty good music, at least they had really good music during their debut era, I have to blame it on the company for not properly promoting them. Whether it was MBK Entertainment's failure to introduce people to the other members of the group, or if it's literally just because they have one of the worst group names in the entirety of K-pop, their company is the only one to blame, and I think these boys definitely deserved a better one. After them we have Uptension, who are a very similar case to BAE173, where two of the members gained a lot of popularity through Produce, Kim Woo-seok and Lee Jin-hyuk, formerly known as Wooshin and Wei respectively under Uptension. Uptension debuted way before these two participated on Produce, but when Produce ended and X1 disbanded, neither of these two returned to the group and had activities with them. Instead, Kim Woo-seok and Lee Jin-hyuk started their solo careers, both of which have been relatively successful, and Kim Woo-seok with his solo career has actually been able to gain 3 music show wins, which is 3 more than he ever got under Uptension. Since those two have stopped promoting with the group, Uptension has had several comebacks without them, and none of them have been very successful, which shows the lack of popularity that the rest of the members have. And since Uptension is just about to hit the 7-year mark as a group, I'm wondering what's going to happen regarding their contracts. Next up we have Black Swan, who are mostly known for their member Fatou, who I actually knew before I knew that Black Swan existed through her TikTok account. She has dozens and dozens of TikToks that have over 1 million views, and she has 1.1 million followers on TikTok, which is over 10 times the amount of monthly listeners that they have on Spotify. None of the other members have even a portion of the online following that Fatou does, and it was only until a few months before their comeback that I realized that she was actually an idol and she was in a group. And it doesn't help that her company is very small too, but actually their music is pretty good, so I suggest that you all stream Tonight and Close to Me because I really love both of those songs. And maybe stan Black Swan while you're at it. Next up we have Lightsum, who are a very similar situation to the other Produce groups, where Chowon actually got 14th place in Produce 48, and to be honest, 99% of the Lightsum variety content that I see is Chowon being invited to shows to talk about her experiences of being rigged out of I.O.I, and from what I've seen, none of the other members have got much promotion at all. I don't really know much about Lightsum's identity as a group besides the group that has the girl who is rigged out of I.O.I, and I think Cube has done an exceptional job at failing to let the general public know who the other members are. After Lightsum we have Secret Number, who I only really knew because of Dita and Denise. I know Dita because she always gets a lot of praise on social media such as Twitter, and after Denise recently actually left the group, I saw her kind of go viral on TikTok too. I looked a little bit more into the group and I saw that they have 2 members who used to be in Produce 48, but even though I watched the show, I genuinely do not have any idea who they are, and especially domestically, the group still hasn't found a foothold into the market. I feel bad for the girls because they've had to go on pretty long hiatuses before and they still don't have a lot of songs. I think they only have 6, and I hope they can gather up enough money to maybe even release a mini album soon. Finally, for this tier we have Mirai, and you've probably heard this one before. They had a member who used to be in X1, and after X1 disbanded, Dongpyo's popularity didn't transfer over to Mirai, and the group hasn't seen much success internationally nor domestically, leaving the rest of the members sort of in Dongpyo's shadow. You know, it's sort of a tale as old as time. And that wraps up all of the groups for this tier, and the next tier is the Known for the Wrong Reasons tier, which is going to be pretty interesting. So let's just get right on into it. So next up is the Known for the Wrong Reasons tier, and this includes groups that are more so known for their bad reputation or maybe their scandals more than their actual music. A lot of these groups genuinely have stellar discographies that get overlooked because of the bad press that was brought upon the group and would likely be so much more successful if they were able to avoid these controversies. Don't get me wrong, there's definitely a lot of varying levels of popularity within this tier, but the factor that all of these groups share is that more people know them for bad reasons than good, which lands them pretty low on the Nugudom iceberg. So the groups that we're going to be talking about in this tier are Speed, Kokosori, Bodopass, DKB, T1419, Leisha, and Daya. So the first group that we're going to talk about is Speed, who had Zico's brother Taewoon as one of the members. And because of Speed's lack of success, and more specifically Taewoon's lack of success compared to his brother Zico, most people nowadays who know Speed at all know them as Zico's failed brothers group. Speed was actually pretty successful during the early years of their career, but afterwards, with Taewoon's increased involvement in the creative process behind the group's music, just increased the amount of comparisons that were made between him and Zico, who is the main producer of Block B, and people don't really separate Taewoon's sad reputation with that of Speed as a group. After speed we have Coco Sori, which is a duet between two members Coco and Sori, and they are very Nugu, so you might not know them at all, but if you do, you probably know about the controversy between the two members. You could make an entire video just on this controversy alone, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but essentially what happened is that Coco Sori's agency actually sued member Coco for defamation against member Sori. All of this happened after the duo disbanded, and according to an update, Coco actually won her defense against the agency, so it's not completely cemented what actually happened between the two. All I know is that not many people know who Coco Sori are, and if they do, they likely just know about the controversy, and that's what landed them in this tier. After them we have DKB or Dakabi, who actually really have good music. I've said this multiple times on my channel before, but most people just know them for their awkward girl group dance covers. I see threads and threads on social media dedicated to people talking about their disdain for DKB's covers, and while their strategy behind this might be the idea of all press is good press, I do think that DKB's sort of reputation surrounding their girl group covers has stopped a really large amount of people from checking out the group as a whole. I think there's a genuinely huge amount of people that only know DKB as the group that humps the floor during their girl group covers, and even though they have pretty good music that really stands out from other 4th gen boy groups, they're not known for this because they just have a pretty bad reputation in other places. I don't know what they could do to fix this, but I do think something needs to be done to sort of reverse this effect. Otherwise, I don't see the future for DKB being very bright. After them we have Daya, who I genuinely really enjoy as a group. They're probably my favorite out of the bottom 4 tiers. However, the only time that people ever really talk about them, at least internationally, is when it comes to their plagiarism scandal. With their comeback UU, Daya got accused of plagiarizing Tinashe's single Super Love, and the controversy actually got big enough to where Tinashe herself addressed it, saying that her director actually wanted to sue Daya's company. Nowadays, if you ask people about Daya, people are mostly only going to know about them because of this controversy, and while the group does have a music show win, they've definitely fallen back into Nugudom considering they haven't had full group activities since 2020. After Daya we have Leisha, who I also genuinely really enjoy as a group, and sadly they aren't taken very seriously within the K-pop industry because of the provocative style of their music videos. So story time to kind of explain what I mean. Recently I reconnected with one of my friends who was into K-pop back in 3rd gen, and when we were in the car I played Pink Label by Leisha because it's genuinely just an amazing song. And she actually recognized the song, but instead of saying "isn't this Leisha," she said "isn't this the group with the crazy music videos?" And I think this is sort of a testament to the fact that people don't really know Leisha for Leisha, they just know Leisha as that one K-pop group. I actually don't think they're officially disbanded, but they haven't released a song since 2019, but I hope they can again because their music is actually really good, and I highly recommend that any of you check out Pink Label by them. After Leisha we have Bodopass, and just to sort of prove my point, if you look up Bodopass on Google, the first thing that shows up is Bodopass K-pop bully. And to keep this video from getting too dark, I'm gonna link a video in the description box below that explains all of the negative things that have happened in Bodopass's career. The video is super in-depth and informative, and does justice to the serious topic that bullying is. So make sure to check out that video after you're done watching this one. And finally, the last group that we're gonna be talking about for this tier is T1419, who have definitely become somewhat of a laughingstock within the K-pop community. They're very renowned for having one of the worst K-pop group names in existence, and there's a huge group of people who have a sort of resentment against this group for the favoritism that their company gives them over their other group Momoland. For example, in 2021 alone, T1419 had their debut and 3 comebacks while Momoland had no official releases, and because there's such a huge difference between the amount of people who know and like Momoland versus the amount of people who know and like T1419, for this reason, among others, T1419 have gotten more and more bad rap with each new comeback, and because of this, not many people know or like the group. And that was the final group of this tier, so that concludes this section. A little disclaimer that I'm not trying to send hate to any of the groups mentioned in this tier, I'm more so just trying to explain why I put them here, and hopefully if you're a fan of one of these groups you can understand that. So without further ado, the next section is the barely holding on tier, and let's just get right into it. So the second to last tier is the barely holding on tier, and this is for the K-pop groups that people will only know if they're super into K-pop. These groups likely come from extremely small companies that have next to no funds to support them, and barely even have an international following, much less a domestic one. You may have seen these groups once or twice on a music show, but you only probably saw them because you were watching for a different group, and overall, due to the unfortunate circumstances, most of the groups in this tier never had much of a chance of success in the first place. So the groups that we're going to be talking about in this tier are Spica, Spica, BDC, BIG, Donkus, D-Once, Grayish, Busters, UNIQ, and Saturday. And as you know, I made this iceberg over a month ago, so let's talk about the group that doesn't belong in this tier anymore, Donkus, also known as DKZ. So even just a month ago, Donkus were the most Nugu of all Nugu groups. Some of their albums haven't even hit 1,000 sales, and most of their music videos failed to hit 10k views in the first day. But recently, with the member J-Chun's appearance in the BL drama Semantic Error, as well as the rebranding of the group from Donkus to DKZ, the group has experienced nothing short of a miracle, and their most recent albums actually hit 80k sales already. I personally have always been a huge fan of Donkus and their music, and I actually recently stanned them with the release of their song Cupid. Sorry, I keep calling them Donkus, but they're DKZ now. I have to remember that. But yeah, recently they're on their way out of Nugudom, and I can't wait to see where this group goes next. Now on to the groups that actually still belong in this tier. We have BDC, who are a trio under the same company as AB6, consisting of 3 trainees who are eliminated on Produce X101. They've been active for 3 years at this point, and they don't have any songs that have over 1 million streams on Spotify, and their company definitely isn't doing much to promote them, considering they just debuted a new boy group with 9 members, and even though fans of BDC wanted these 3 in the lineup, they are sadly absent from it. And since their company has a new boy group to focus on, I think BDC are going to be left in the background, which I'm pretty sad about. After BDC, we have Saturday, who are currently a 5-member girl group, but they've gone through numerous lineup changes in the past, and they haven't released any music since early last year. I don't think their company doesn't want to promote them, I just don't think they have the necessary funds to do so, because recently it's been discovered that the girls are actually in Japan right now and are giving out flyers to people on the streets in order to promote the group. Hopefully they'll be able to raise enough money to have a comeback soon, but I'm not sure if their hard work is going to be able to pay off. After them, we have Spica, who are definitely the least Nugu out of all of the groups in this list at their peak, but since then they've definitely fallen back into obscurity. They debuted in 2012 and disbanded in 2017, and at one point their song You Don't Love Me did so well that they were nominated to get a music show win, but sadly they ended up losing to I.O.I for Miniskirt, and from that point on their comebacks did progressively worse with each new one, until their final one, Secret Time, which didn't even hit 20k digital sales. I actually stan this group though, and I think they have amazing music, so if you have the time, definitely check them out, and support 2 of the members in their currently active subunit Kimbo. After Spica, we have UNIQ, which is a group where most of the members were able to gain individual fame after they stopped their group activities. Even though they debuted back in 2014, when the competition wasn't nearly as stiff as it is nowadays, their only song that ever appeared on the Gaon digital charts is their debut song Falling in Love, which appeared at number 294. So as you can assume, the group was not very successful, but all of the members were able to find a lot more success individually, and my favorite of the bunch is probably Sungyeon, also known as Woods nowadays, where he has a growing and promising music career. Then we have Busters, who Yeso from Kepler is a former member of, and Busters is definitely a group that people would consider like the most Nugu of Nugu. According to what I've seen online, one year Busters attended ISAC, which is short for I-dle Star Athletics Championships, and one of the features of this event is that each group that attends gets their own section of the bleachers where their fans exclusively can sit. Obviously there are varying levels of popularity from each group that attends, so certain groups are going to need more seats than others, and according to what I've read, since Busters were never the most popular, they actually only got 20 seats, but they also only sold 11 tickets. I'm not entirely sure if this is true, so take this with a grain of salt, but if it is, that's kind of a prime example of them being sort of Nugu. But Busters are having a comeback on the 27th of April in this year, so make sure to support them there. After Busters, we have D-Once, who are actually the brother group of Dreamcatcher, who were in part 1 of this series, and despite having multiple members that got a really good amount of screen time in the second season of Produce 101, as well as one of those members being the literal winner of the survival show Mix 9, Woo Jin Young, I kind of doubt most of the people watching have literally ever heard of D-Once. I will say, by having a number in their name, as well as sort of falling into the category of noisy 4th gen boy groups, there's definitely not too much about D-Once that makes them stand out, but I'm surprised that their previous survival show clout didn't make them more popular in the long term. Second to last for this tier, we have BIG, who have surprisingly been around since 2014 and are still active today, but at the same time have never racked up more than 1 million streams on any of their songs on Spotify. From what I can tell, the most popular song that they've been a part of is from when they created a co-ed group with 3YE, who we mentioned earlier in the video and are actually under the same company as them, and the song is titled Presente and has over 800,000 streams on Spotify. But sadly, 800,000 isn't really enough in the competitive K-pop scene to consider a group not Nugu, and they definitely kind of belong on the lower end of this iceberg. And finally, we have Grayish, and I actually had to look up if you pronounce it G-Rayish because they have that dash, but apparently it's just there for no reason. And neither on YouTube or Spotify do any of their songs have over 1 million streams, and they actually only have one on both platforms that has over 500k. And yes, I know I've said this a million times in this video already, but again, this group kinda just got screwed over by their company. Even though they've been active since 2017, I don't think I've ever seen Grayish on any sort of variety show that I've watched, and from what I've seen, they also don't perform on every music show when they have a comeback, which I'm assuming is because their company either doesn't have money money or isn't very respected within the industry. They're not officially disbanded, but I also haven't heard any talk about a future comeback, and while this group does have so much potential, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to fully realize it. And that section concludes this tier, which means that we only have one tier left, which is the 2 Nugu even for me tier. Pretty self-explanatory. Let's get right into it. So the final tier is the 2 Nugu even for me tier, and this is for groups that I didn't even know or had extremely little knowledge about them before I started recording this. Like, you're really only gonna know about these groups if you specifically go out of your way to search for extremely Nugu groups. And I think I'll prove my point when I tell you that the groups in this tier are Black 6, D-Crunch, Posh Girls, Target, Hint, 2Z, We Girls, and Unica. And I guess let's just get right into the explanations by starting with Black 6. So Black 6 was a 6-member boy group under Black Hole Entertainment, if only I had a quarter for every person who doesn't know that entertainment company. And with merely 12,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, they only had 5 releases before they disbanded in 2021, even though they debuted in 2017. I think a really common factor among extremely Nugu groups is that they tend to release only digital singles for a lot of their releases. And this pretty heavily aligns with Black 6's career, considering that over their 4 or 5 year time as a group, they had 3 digital singles and only 2 mini albums. I think it's mostly because really small companies can't actually afford to buy a lot of songs from music producers, and sometimes when you take into account the expenses of producing a music video, as well as buying outfits for music shows, and even hiring people to make sure that the comeback goes smoothly, I'm assuming that sometimes the only way to make this possible is to only buy one song for the comeback, because if you're a small company, you only have so much money to budget with, and I think that's probably why Black 6 have released so many singles. Another group that I think this applies to is Hint, who I actually found out about through one of my friend vixxo's videos, where she listed their song I.O.I as one of the most underrated comebacks of 2020, and I could not agree more with the song having under 20,000 streams and the group only having 264 monthly listeners, not even 1,000. I'll play a little bit of I.O.I right now. And if you think that sounded good, just check out the rest of the song, please. This also applies to We Girls, who debuted under, let me look, After Moon Entertainment. Let me know if any of you have ever heard of that company in the comment section below. And over the course of their entire career, only released 2 EPs and 3 singles. And this is pretty sad, none of their albums have ever sold over 1,000 copies. And their most recent one only sold 343. Their official YouTube channel also has under 6,000 subscribers, and most of their YouTube videos averaged around 500 views. So I can safely say that not many people knew about them. Next, we're going to talk about 2Z, which is a K-band, and while they're not the most popular yet, they're doing a really good job at promoting themselves. They debuted in 2020, and along with a plethora of singles, they've also released a few mini albums and even a full album already. They've also recorded and released around 10 OSTs, but sadly they're still relatively unknown, having under 25,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. I think 2Z's promotion is gonna pay off pretty soon, it just hasn't done so yet, and I'm definitely gonna be supporting them to try and increase their chances of making it big. After 2Z we have Unica. They have one song, they have 100 monthly listeners, and that one song has 1,374 streams. They debuted in 2017, and thankfully they disbanded in 2018 so they weren't stuck in a contract for a long time, and I'm definitely glad that these girls at least tried their hand at reaching stardom, but unfortunately this time the stars did not align. After them we have Target, who didn't start off that Nugu. Their first physical album actually sold over 11,000 copies, but in recent years they've definitely lost a lot of their popularity. Their most recent album only sold a little bit more than 1,000 copies, and even though they're technically still a group, they haven't had any official releases since 2019, so they've lost a lot of popularity. When you come from a smaller company, you need to have really frequent releases in order to keep people's attention, but when you don't have a lot of money, that's just not possible a lot of the time. And Target are definitely a victim of just people losing interest in them. After them, we have Posh Girls, who debuted last year, and their debut music video is currently standing at 158,000 views, and from what I've seen, even though they've only had one release, they've already lost like half of their members. And member changes are also a pretty frequent commonality among Nugu groups. They haven't posted on their YouTube channel in almost 2 months, which is not a good sign, and while I am hopeful for their future, I'm not too optimistic about it. And yeah, I guess that concludes this long iceberg. Honestly, if I really tried, I could probably extend this into like 15 different tiers or maybe even more, but I just wanted to let people know what I kind of consider the different levels of Nugudom, because my channel is pretty centered around Nugus, I'd like to think. This is all based on my own mindset of how I view Nugudom, so I hope you were all able to sort of gain an understanding into my point of view, I guess. And I hope that you were able to be like pretty interested throughout this watch. I kind of spent all week sort of working on this bit by bit, and I put a lot of effort into it. So if you enjoyed, I would really appreciate a like, a subscription, or a share. And I hope you all have an amazing week this week. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for supporting my channel. I'm sorry I took a sort of hiatus this week. I've been pretty busy all throughout the entirety of 2022, and I wanted to take a week off just to focus on myself. But now that I'm sort of recharged and recovered, I'm gonna bring you all so much good content. Thank you all again so much for watching. Thank you all again for supporting me, and without further ado, I'll see you all next time. Peace out.